After my husband's death, I hid a $23 million secret. 5 years later, my own son tried to take it all. My name's Margaret, and 5 years ago, my life turned upside down. My husband, Daniel, passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. We'd been married for 27 years, building a comfortable life together. A week after the funeral, Daniel's lawyer called me in for a meeting. That's when I learned the truth. Daniel had left me an inheritance worth $18 million, money he'd quietly invested and grown over decades. I was in shock. Daniel had always been careful with money, but I never imagined he'd built such wealth. The lawyer explained that Daniel had intentionally kept it private to avoid family disputes. He left explicit instructions that the money was for my use only, to ensure I'd be secure for the rest of my life. I felt both grateful and overwhelmed. But I also knew my son, Eric, could become reckless if he learned about it too soon. Eric was 25 at the time, smart but impulsive. He'd already gone through 2 failed business ventures and was constantly borrowing from friends. If he knew about the inheritance, I feared it would vanish in a matter of years. So I followed Daniel's wishes and told no one, not even Eric. I moved most of the money into secure investments and lived modestly, just as I always had. On the outside, nothing about my life changed. For the next 5 years, I quietly enjoyed a peaceful life. I paid off the house, traveled occasionally, and donated anonymously to charities I cared about. Eric seemed to be getting his life together. He started a new business and even got engaged. I thought maybe one day I could share the truth with him. But deep down, I still worried he hadn't fully matured. And my instincts, as it turned out, were right. Last year, I began noticing subtle changes in Eric's attitude. He'd make comments about how I must be sitting on a pile of cash because I never seemed stressed about bills. I also started asking pointed questions about Dad's investments, things he'd never cared about before. I brushed them off, but I could feel the suspicion growing. Then, one evening, he came over and dropped a bombshell. "I know about the money, Mom," he said bluntly. My heart sank. He claimed he'd found old bank statements in the attic while looking for photo albums. I realized he must have stumbled across some of Daniel's investment papers. Eric's face was tense. "You've been hiding it from me all these years. That money should be mine too. Dad would have wanted me to have it." My hands were shaking, but I stayed calm. I reminded him that the will was clear. The money was left solely to me. Eric didn't take it well. He accused me of being selfish and of hoarding wealth while he struggled. I told him I'd been supporting him quietly for years, paying off some of his debts and covering emergencies without him knowing. But he wasn't interested in gratitude. He wanted control over the fortune. That's when things turned ugly. Within a month, Eric had hired a lawyer and filed a legal claim against me, arguing that I'd mismanaged family assets and deprived him of his rightful inheritance. I couldn't believe my own son would take me to court. The emotional pain was worse than the legal fight. Friends told me to settle, but I refused. Daniel's wishes mattered, and I wasn't going to betray them. I prepared for a long battle. During the trial, my lawyer presented Daniel's will, investment records, and letters he'd left for me. Those letters were powerful. Daniel had written about his fears for Eric's financial habits and his desire for me to manage the fortune wisely. When the judge read them aloud, I saw Eric's face change, but his anger didn't fade. Even after the court ruled in my favor, he barely spoke to me. Today, I still have the inheritance, but I've lost something far more precious: the relationship with my son. I hope that one day he'll understand why I did what I did. Until then, I live my life quietly, honoring Daniel's memory. I've learned that protecting a legacy isn't just about money. It's about safeguarding the values and love it represents. And sometimes love means saying no, even to your own child. Months passed and life seemed calm on the surface, but I noticed Daniel growing more curious about our finances. He'd ask casual questions about bills, insurance, and old savings. I brushed it off, thinking he was just being responsible. Still, I kept the inheritance untouched in a trust account under my name only. My late husband always said, "Protect it for your future and for his." At times, I wondered if Daniel sensed there was more money than he'd been told. One afternoon, I caught Daniel snooping in my home office. He claimed he was looking for printer paper, but the desk drawers he opened had no paper, only my financial files. My stomach tightened and my pulse quickened. I didn't confront him right away, not wanting to escalate without proof. That night, though, I quietly moved all the trust documents and sensitive papers to a secure deposit box at the bank. I slept better knowing they were beyond his reach. A year later, Daniel announced he was getting married. His fiancée, Claire, was charming at first, but had a subtle arrogance that set me on edge. At dinner one night, she casually asked, "So, when Daniel inherits everything, do we get the house too?" I almost choked on my drink. I told her, "That's not how it works," and quickly changed the subject. The way she smiled afterward felt calculated, as if she was already mapping out how my life's assets would be divided. After that conversation, Daniel's visits became less about family and more about property discussions. He'd bring up future plans for the house, the land, even the artwork. At first, I tried to laugh it off, but each comment chipped away at my trust. I realized he wasn't just thinking about my well-being, he was calculating his eventual payday. And worse, Claire seemed to encourage it, dropping hints about renovations before I was even gone. When I refused to hand over the deed to the house to avoid legal issues in the future, Daniel grew cold. "It's going to be mine anyway, Mom," he said flatly, his eyes lacking any warmth. That sentence echoed in my head for days. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up with him when he was sick, all the sacrifices I'd made. Now, it felt like he saw me as an obstacle instead of a mother. I knew I had to act before greed tore us apart completely. I visited my lawyer, Mr. Lawson, and updated my will. I placed the majority of the inheritance in a charitable foundation under my control. Daniel would still get something, but far less than he imagined. I hated doing it, but I couldn't reward manipulation and entitlement. As Mr. Lawson signed the last page, he looked at me and said gently, "Sometimes protecting yourself means making the hard choices. It doesn't mean you love him less." When Daniel found out, because Claire apparently overheard me on the phone with Mr. Lawson, he exploded. "You're stealing my future," he yelled, slamming his fist on my kitchen table. My heart pounded, but I stayed calm. "Your future is yours to earn, not to take from me," I said firmly. His face twisted in anger. For a brief moment, I saw the little boy I once knew vanish completely, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Weeks later, I discovered they had tried to access my bank account using forged documents. The bank immediately flagged it and contacted me, their tone both professional and concerned. I was furious, but even more than that, I was heartbroken. This was my son, my only child, crossing a line I never thought he would. Sitting in my car outside the bank, I cried, not just for the betrayal, but for the realization that the relationship might never recover. I filed a police report, something I never imagined doing against my own family. The officers were sympathetic, and one even said, "Ma'am, you're doing the right thing." But the betrayal weighed heavier than any legal matter. Daniel stopped speaking to me after that, except for one last text. "You'll regret this." I stared at those words for a long time before deleting them. I knew there was no going back from this point. That night, I sat alone in the living room, holding the last family photo we took together. My late husband's words rang in my mind again about protecting the money for my future. I realized he'd been right all along. Love doesn't excuse betrayal, and sometimes protecting yourself means letting go of those who hurt you. I placed the photo back on the shelf, wiped my tears, and decided I would move forward with my life, even if Daniel wasn't in it. Months passed with silence between us. I kept busy with volunteer work at the charity I had funded. Helping others gave me purpose and distracted me from the emptiness at home. But some nights, when the house felt too quiet, I would wonder where Daniel was, if he was happy, if he even thought about me. The pain didn't disappear. It just dulled over time, replaced by a bittersweet acceptance that our relationship might never be the same. Then, out of nowhere, Daniel showed up at my doorstep. He looked thinner, his eyes tired. For a moment, I almost invited him in without a word. But then I saw Claire's car idling at the curb, her sharp gaze watching us. "I need money," he said bluntly, skipping any greeting. My heart sank. He wasn't here to reconcile. He was here because he needed something, again. The wall between us grew higher in that instant. "I can't help you, Daniel," I said, my voice steady despite the ache inside. "This isn't about punishment. It's about boundaries." He scoffed, muttering something under his breath before storming back to the car. Claire shot me a glare as they drove off, and I knew I wouldn't see him again for a long time. I stood in the doorway long after the sound of the engine faded, the chill of the evening settling into my bones. Weeks later, I received a letter from a lawyer. Daniel was contesting my will, The audacity stunned me. He claimed I was mentally unfit to manage my own finances, pointing to my decision to donate large sums as evidence. My hands trembled as I read the words, a mix of anger and sorrow flooding through me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was an attempt to strip me of my independence. I fought back. My lawyer gathered statements from doctors, friends, and even my accountant, all attesting to my mental clarity and capability. The case dragged on for months, each court date a reminder of how far we'd fallen from the days when we laughed over family dinners. Sometimes in the courtroom, I'd catch Daniel looking at me not with love, but with cold calculation, as though I were just an opponent to defeat. The judge ultimately dismissed his claim, citing lack of evidence and clear intent in my will. Daniel didn't even look at me as the ruling was read. Claire whispered something to him, and they left without a backward glance. I sat there in the emptying courtroom, feeling both victorious and hollow. Winning didn't feel like a triumph, it felt like closing the last door between us. After the trial, I made a decision. I sold the house Daniel had been so eager to claim. The memories it held were precious, but I realized I needed a fresh start in a place untouched by bitterness. I bought a smaller home near the coast where I could hear the ocean at night. The waves became a kind of therapy, their rhythm reminding me that life moves forward, no matter the storms. In my new home, I started writing letters to Daniel, not to send, just to express what I couldn't say out loud. I wrote about our happiest memories, about how much I still loved him despite everything, and about the hope that one day he might find his way back. Sometimes the letters ended in tears, other times in quiet resolve. They filled a box I kept in my closet, a silent record of a mother's love. One morning, I received a postcard from an unfamiliar address. It was from Daniel. The message was short. "I'm sorry. I'm not ready to talk yet." I traced the letters with my fingers, unsure whether to feel relief or sadness. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was the first crack in the wall that had stood between us for years. For now, that was enough. I realized then that my son's greed wasn't just about money, it was about control. He wanted to dictate my life, to take away everything I had worked for with his father. That night, I sat alone in my room, holding the will in my hands, and promised myself I wouldn't let him destroy my peace. If he wanted a fight, I was ready. I realized then that my son's greed wasn't just about money, it was about control. He wanted to dictate my life, to take away everything I had worked for with his father. That night, I sat alone in my room, holding the will in my hands, and promised myself I wouldn't let him destroy my peace. If he wanted a fight, I was ready. Following Mr. Harris's advice, I visited my bank. I moved the bulk of the inheritance into a private account only I could access. The bank manager raised an eyebrow when I explained my reason, but after showing him the legal papers, he understood. "Family can be the hardest to protect yourself from," he murmured. His words hit deep. A week later, my son showed up again, this time without his wife. He tried to play the concerned son role, bringing flowers and talking sweetly, but I could see the tension in his eyes. After an hour, he casually mentioned updating the will for my own good. I smiled politely, but told him I had already discussed everything with my lawyer. His face dropped. When he realized I wasn't going to be manipulated, his tone shifted. He accused me of not trusting my own family. "I'm your son. Why would I hurt you?" I wanted to believe him, but the memory of him arriving with that notary was still fresh. I told him trust is earned, not demanded. He left in silence, slamming the door behind him. 2 days later, I received a letter from his lawyer, claiming I was mentally unfit to handle my finances, and suggesting he be appointed as my legal guardian. My hands shook as I read it. This wasn't just greed. It was an all-out attack. I immediately forwarded the letter to Mr. Harris, who assured me they didn't have a legal leg to stand on. Still, the stress took its toll. I found myself unable to sleep, constantly glancing over my shoulder. Friends told me to take a short trip, clear my mind. Instead, I decided to host a small gathering of people I trusted. I wanted my home filled with warmth and support, not tension. My closest friends came, and for the first time in weeks, I laughed. During that gathering, one of my friends, Linda, pulled me aside. She revealed she had overheard my son and his wife talking in a cafe. Apparently, they were planning to sell my house as soon as they got control of my estate. Hearing this confirmed everything I feared. It also lit a fire in me. I wasn't just defending money, I was defending my life. The very next morning, I instructed Mr. Harris to update my will and make my inheritance untouchable until my passing, with clear clauses to prevent forced guardianship. We also added a charitable foundation in my husband's name, ensuring part of the money would go to causes we both cared about. This way, even if my son tried again, he'd be blocked. When my son learned of the updated will, he came to my house in a rage. "You're ruining our family!" he shouted. I stood my ground, telling him that family doesn't try to steal from each other. His anger boiled over, and for a moment I saw a side of him I'd never seen, cold, entitled, and dangerous. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at my husband's photo. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I never thought our son would turn out this way." But I knew my husband would be proud of me for protecting what we built. I also knew this battle wasn't over. My son was stubborn, and he wasn't going to give up easily. A week had passed since my last argument with my son. I thought he had calmed down, but one morning I saw an unfamiliar car parked outside my house. In the driver's seat was his wife, staring directly at my front door. She didn't get out, just sat there watching. My stomach tightened. I acted as if I hadn't noticed, but deep down I knew they were planning something, and this time they might be more careful. Later that day, I received a strange call from my neighbor. She said she saw my son and his wife speaking to a man in a suit nearby. What unsettled her was how often they glanced toward my home. I thanked her and immediately called Mr. Harris. He warned me to be ready for a possible visit from social services, or even false accusations designed to pressure me into giving them what they wanted. To stay ahead, we decided to bring in an official medical examiner to confirm my full mental capacity. The evaluation was quick, and I even joked with the doctor that I now had protection against nonsense. The signed and stamped certificate went straight to my lawyer, another layer of defense in case they tried to claim I was unfit to manage my own affairs. Sure enough, a few days later, 2 people arrived, claiming to be from the Adult Protection Services. They said they had received a complaint about my well-being. I calmly invited them inside, showed them my spotless home, the medical certificate, and even offered tea. They seemed embarrassed. I knew right then, this round was mine. After their visit, I realized it was time to be proactive. I was done living in constant fear of their next move. I began gathering evidence, saving every letter, text, and statement from friends and neighbors. If this ever went to court, I would be ready. Mr. Harris approved of my plan, and even hired a private investigator to monitor my son's activities. The investigator quickly uncovered something valuable. My son and his wife were drowning in debt after a failed business investment. Their loan was on the verge of default, and the bank had started demanding payment. Suddenly, their desperation for my money made perfect sense. This wasn't just greed, it was panic over losing everything. Knowledge gave me an advantage. I decided to use it not for revenge, but to set boundaries. The next time my son called, I invited him over for a talk. He arrived with a cold expression, but I calmly laid out documents proving I knew about his debts. "I know the truth," I said. His hands trembled as he stared at the papers. He tried to deny it, but I cut him off. "You could have just asked for help. Instead, you tried to take what wasn't yours. If you want my help, you'll sign an agreement. No claims to my estate now or in the future." He sat in silence, pride and fear battling inside him. I could see the war in his eyes. After a few tense minutes, he agreed. My lawyer drafted the document, and he signed it. But in his eyes, I saw it. This wasn't over. His wife would never let him give up so easily. I knew there would be more attempts, possibly even more underhanded than before. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of the young man he used to be, kind, helpful, full of promise. Where had that person gone? Maybe life and failure had hardened him, but betrayal is never justified. I decided I would protect what's mine to the very end, even if it meant cutting him out of my life for good. Days turned into weeks, and the tension inside the house was suffocating. My son barely spoke to me, but I noticed subtle signs, furtive glances, whispered phone calls, and a growing distance I couldn't bridge. I wondered if he felt guilt, or if anger had completely taken over. Either way, I knew I had to stay strong and vigilant. This battle wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, and that was much harder to rebuild. One afternoon, a package arrived without a return address. Inside, I found a single note: "You can't hide forever." My heart raced. Was this a threat? A warning? Or a desperate plea disguised as menace? I showed the note to Mr. Harris, who immediately urged me to increase security and stay cautious. The game was escalating, and I had no idea where it would lead next. I hired a security team, and they installed cameras around the property. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of safety. But the cameras also caught unexpected footage. My son sneaking into the garden late at night, whispering into his phone. Was he planning another scheme? Or was there something else beneath the surface I hadn't seen yet? That night, I stayed awake, replaying the footage over and over. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was my son's voice, softer, less aggressive. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked. I hesitated, but something inside me urged a cautious hope. Maybe, after everything, there was still a chance to heal, even if just a little. We met at a small cafe far from home. His eyes were tired, shadows underlined his usual bravado. He spoke slowly, carefully, admitting the weight of his mistakes and the desperation that drove him to betray me. For the first time, he apologized, not just with words, but with genuine remorse. It was a fragile moment, but one I chose to hold on to. I told him forgiveness wouldn't come easily, but it was possible if he was willing to rebuild trust step by step. I set clear boundaries: no money, no shortcuts. If he wanted a relationship, it had to be honest and free of greed. He nodded, relief mixed with fear in his eyes. We parted with a fragile understanding, both unsure what the future held. Back home, I felt lighter, but wary. This truce was fragile, like glass. I reminded myself to stay alert. Meanwhile, the private investigator reported new information. His wife had been seen meeting with unknown men, possibly trying to secure another loan under false pretenses. The threat wasn't gone, it just shifted direction. Determined not to let fear rule me, I organized a small gathering of close friends and family to remind myself of what truly mattered: love and loyalty beyond money. Surrounded by warm smiles and genuine care, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe the darkness could be pushed back, if only I kept fighting for it. But the next morning, the unthinkable happened. My son disappeared. No calls, no messages, no sign of where he'd gone. Panic gripped me instantly. Had he run away in shame? Or was this another ploy? I called Mr. Harris and the investigator, and we launched a search. The fragile peace shattered, replaced by a gnawing fear I couldn't shake. Hours later, a call came through. My son was alive but in trouble, caught in a dangerous deal with some old associates trying to pull him deeper into debt and crime. His wife was nowhere to be found. I felt a crushing mix of sorrow and determination. This was bigger than money now. It was about saving him from himself before it was too late. I didn't waste a moment. With Mr. Harris and the private investigator by my side, we contacted the local police, desperate to find my son before things spiraled completely out of control. My emotions were torn anger at his reckless choices, but above all, a mother's love that refused to abandon him. I prayed silently, hoping the kind boy I once knew was still inside him, waiting to be saved from the darkness engulfing him. The days dragged on with no sign of him. Every unanswered call felt like a punch to my chest, intensifying the gnawing fear inside me. I found myself reliving every moment we shared, searching for clues or warnings I might have missed. It became painfully clear. No amount of money could replace my son's presence. He was more valuable to me than any fortune. My heart ached as I realized how far he'd fallen, and how much hope I still had left. Then, one late evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "He's safe, but not out of danger. Meet me at the old pier at midnight." My pulse quickened. I knew this meeting could change everything. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about life and possibly death. I steeled myself, knowing I had to face whatever waited at that pier, no matter how frightening it might be. At the pier, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, a man connected to the criminal underworld my son had gotten entangled with. He proposed a deal: protection for silence about their illegal dealings. I refused outright, telling him firmly I wouldn't be part of their dangerous game, regardless of the cost. My family wasn't a commodity to be traded, and I would fight tooth and nail to keep it safe from their grasp. The man warned me that walking away wouldn't be easy, that my son's life was hanging by a thread. But I stood my ground, determined to protect what mattered most. I immediately contacted the police and shared everything I knew about their operations. This wasn't just a financial dispute anymore. It was a battle for justice and the chance to save my son from a destructive path. Next morning, officers found my son near an abandoned warehouse weak, scared, but alive. Relief flooded through me, but I could see the toll his ordeal had taken in his haunted eyes. I held him tightly, silently promising myself that I would protect him no matter what, even if it meant confronting the darkest parts of his world. This was about love, not money anymore. He agreed to enter rehabilitation to break free from the toxic influences that had nearly destroyed him. The road was grueling and painful for both of us, filled with setbacks and raw confessions. But beneath all the hardship, a fragile hope began to grow, a belief that healing was possible, and that maybe, just maybe, my son could reclaim the life he once dreamed of. Meanwhile, I took every legal step to secure my inheritance and ensure my son had no control or claim over it. Though harsh, it was necessary to prevent old patterns from repeating themselves. I hoped that one day, when he was stronger and ready, we could rebuild our relationship based on honesty and respect, but only on new terms, free from greed and betrayal. Months passed, and the distance between us slowly lessened, replaced by cautious conversations and tentative trust. The son I once knew was still buried beneath layers of pain and mistakes, but he was there. I chose to believe in him rather than the bitterness and fear that had once driven us apart. Step by step, we began to heal a fractured bond that once seemed irreparable. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast a warm glow over the garden, my son looked at me and said, "Thank you, Mom, for never giving up on me." Tears welled in my eyes as I realized how far we'd come. The road ahead was still long, and the scars would remain, but in that moment, love triumphed over secrets, betrayal, and fortune. We had survived, and that was everything. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast a warm glow over the garden, my son looked at me and said, "Thank you, Mom, for never giving up on me." Tears welled in my eyes as I realized how far we'd come. The road ahead was still long, and the scars would remain, but in that moment, love triumphed over secrets, betrayal, and fortune. We had survived, and that was everything. One afternoon, I received an unexpected letter from my son's wife. She wanted to meet and talk to explain her side of the story. Part of me hesitated, wary of manipulation or false promises, but I knew closure was necessary. With cautious hope, I agreed. Sometimes even those who caused pain want to make amends, and I was curious if that was truly the case for her. We met at a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. She appeared different, worn from the ordeal, but sincere. She confessed her mistakes, admitting that greed had blinded her and that she regretted the pain it caused our family. I listened carefully, still guarded but willing to hear her out. Sometimes the hardest truths pave the way for the possibility of forgiveness and understanding. I was clear from the start. Trust had to be earned, not given lightly. No more secrets or underhanded tactics. If she wanted any part of my son's new life, she needed to respect the boundaries I'd set. Surprisingly, she agreed without resistance. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a fragile start, a small step toward mending what had been broken. Meanwhile, my lawyer advised me to revisit and update my estate plans. After everything we'd been through, securing my inheritance became even more critical. We revised wills, established new trusts, and added layers of legal protection to ensure no future claims could threaten what was rightfully mine. It was complex and draining work, but peace of mind was worth every effort. Life settled into a cautious rhythm. My son continued his therapy and rehabilitation, making steady progress. I found solace in philanthropy, dedicating time and resources to help families shattered by financial betrayal and addiction. Helping others heal gave my own pain meaning. Each smile and grateful thanks reminded me that even broken lives could be rebuilt with patience and love. One afternoon, while sorting through old photographs, I found a picture of my husband smiling, a warm, genuine smile full of hope and life. I whispered to the empty room, "I'm trying my best, for you, for us." The inheritance was no longer just a sum of money. It was a legacy of love, sacrifice, and resilience that I was determined to honor, no matter what. Months later, my son approached me with an idea to start a foundation in his father's name that would support those struggling with addiction and financial ruin. I was overwhelmed with pride. Despite everything, the young man I loved was resurfacing, stronger and more determined to make a difference. Our family's painful past could now fuel a hopeful future. We launched the foundation quietly, gathering a small group of trusted friends and supporters. Watching my son speak with honesty and passion, I felt a surge of hope. The fight wasn't over, and the scars remained, but we had won a vital victory. Healing was possible, and our story, though imperfect, could inspire others to find strength through adversity. As the sun set on that hopeful day, I finally allowed myself to believe in a new beginning. The $23 million inheritance was still protected, but the real treasure was the fragile, growing bond between my son and me. No amount of money could replace that. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that, more than anything, was enough to keep going. The foundation quickly gained momentum, and for the first time in years, I saw my son's eyes light up with genuine purpose. He threw himself into the work, meeting families who reminded him of his own struggles. Watching him connect with others gave me hope. Maybe this was the turning point we'd both been waiting for. Slowly, the weight of the past began to lift, replaced by a quiet determination to build something meaningful together. Despite the progress, shadows lingered. Old acquaintances from my son's past still tried to pull him back into dangerous circles. One evening, he confided in me about a tense encounter, a warning disguised as a friendly reminder that some debts were never truly paid. He knew the road ahead would never be easy, but he was stronger now, and I was ready to stand by his side through every challenge. Our bond deepened as we navigated these obstacles. I shared stories of my husband's resilience and the lessons he'd taught me about strength and forgiveness. My son listened intently, absorbing every word. It felt like a bridge was forming, a path toward mutual understanding and healing. The inheritance, once a source of division, had become a catalyst for reconciliation. One day a letter arrived that shook us both. It was from a lawyer representing a distant relative, claiming a share of the inheritance. The timing couldn't have been worse. Fear threatened to unravel the progress we'd made. But instead of panicking, we faced it head-on, armed with the legal safeguards we'd carefully put in place. This was another test, one we were determined to pass. We hired new legal counsel and prepared for what could be a lengthy battle. The process was exhausting, but every setback only strengthened our resolve. Through it all, my son stood by me not as an adversary, but as an ally. The partnership we forged in hardship gave me a renewed sense of hope. For the first time, I truly believed our family could survive anything together. As months passed, the relatives' claim lost momentum, eventually dismissed by the court. Relief washed over us, but I knew vigilance was necessary. Life had taught me that peace is never guaranteed, especially when money and family intertwine. Yet with my son by my side, I felt ready to face whatever came next. Our fight was far from over, but we had reclaimed control of our destiny. The foundation grew, touching more lives than I ever imagined. We hosted events, raised funds, and shared our story publicly, turning personal pain into collective hope. My son became a spokesperson for recovery and redemption, inspiring others to break cycles of addiction and betrayal. Witnessing his transformation was the greatest gift I could have hoped for. One quiet evening, as we sat together reviewing foundation plans, my son reached out and took my hand. "Thank you for never giving up," he said softly. I squeezed his hand back, tears in my eyes. In that simple moment, years of hurt and mistrust melted away. We had forged a new bond, stronger, wiser, and full of love. The past hadn't defined us. It had only made us stronger. Looking ahead, I knew challenges would come, expected storms that could threaten our fragile peace. But I was no longer afraid. The inheritance, the money, the secrets, they were just parts of a larger story about resilience, forgiveness, and the unbreakable ties of family. Together, we were writing a new chapter, filled with hope, healing, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. As night fell and the stars appeared, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Against all odds, we had survived the darkest days. The $23 million was still safe, yes, But the true wealth was the healing between a mother and her son, a treasure no amount of money could buy. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was more than enough to keep moving forward together. Months turned into years, and the foundation became a beacon of hope in our community. My son's transformation inspired countless others. Each success story reaffirmed the path we had chosen, a path of healing and second chances. While the inheritance still guarded our future, it no longer ruled our lives. Instead, it fueled a mission far greater than money, restoring broken lives and rebuilding trust within families like ours. Despite all progress, I remained cautious. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild fully. Old wounds sometimes reopened in quiet moments, but we faced them honestly, talking late into the night about fears, regrets, and dreams. Slowly, the fragile threads of family ties wove back into something stronger and more resilient than before. We learned that healing is not linear, it's a journey full of setbacks and triumphs. One unexpected day, a reporter contacted me, intrigued by our story. At first, I hesitated to share such personal pain publicly, but then I realized the power of our journey, the message that even in betrayal and heartbreak, love and forgiveness could prevail. We agreed to an interview, hoping our experience might offer strength and hope to others facing similar struggles. The interview aired nationwide, and the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers thanking us for our courage. Some shared their own stories of betrayal and loss. Others asked how they might start their own healing journey. It became clear that our private pain had become a public source of inspiration. We had turned our darkest chapter into a light for others. With the Foundation's growing influence, we began partnering with other organizations focused on addiction recovery and financial counseling. Together, we created programs designed to educate and support families before crises spiraled out of control. My son often spoke at these events, sharing candidly about his mistakes and recovery. His honesty was a powerful reminder that redemption is possible. Yet, despite all the good work, I never let my guard down completely. Old rivals and opportunists still lurked in the background, eyeing the inheritance with greedy intent. I reinforced my legal protections, continually updating documents and trusts. Every time I thought we were safe, a new threat emerged. But with every challenge, my resolve only grew stronger. This was no longer just about money, it was about protecting the family we'd rebuilt. One afternoon, my son surprised me with a small, hand-painted canvas. It was a simple image of a tree with deep roots and budding leaves, symbolic of our family's journey through hardship to renewal. I was moved to tears. This was more than a gift, it was a promise. No matter the storms ahead, our roots were strong, and we would continue to grow together. As the years passed, the foundation flourished, and my son's reputation shifted from troubled heir to dedicated advocate. He found peace in service, turning past mistakes into lessons that could help others avoid the same pitfalls. Watching him evolve was both humbling and inspiring. The inheritance had become a tool for change, not conflict, a legacy far richer than any fortune. Despite everything, the pain of lost time remained. There were moments when the distance between what was and what could have been ached deeply. But we learned to focus on the present, on the love and trust slowly being rebuilt day by day. Forgiveness didn't erase the past, but it gave us the strength to face the future with open hearts. One evening, as we sat watching the sunset together, my son turned to me and said, "Mom, thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." I smiled through tears, knowing that those words were the greatest reward I could ever receive. Our story, marked by betrayal, pain, and ultimately redemption, had come full circle. And for the first time in years, I felt truly hopeful about the future. The years brought change in unexpected ways. My son's progress inspired me to write a memoir, a candid account of loss, betrayal, and the difficult path to forgiveness. I hoped that by sharing our story, others might find courage in their own struggles. Writing was cathartic, allowing me to process pain and celebrate healing. The book soon caught attention, opening doors for speaking engagements and new opportunities to spread our message of hope. As the foundation grew, so did our network of support. We brought in counselors, financial advisors, and medical professionals to build comprehensive programs, Each success story reminded me why I fought so fiercely to protect our family's legacy. Money alone couldn't heal wounds, but when used wisely, it could create ripples of change far beyond what I had ever imagined. Still, not every day was easy. Some mornings I woke with a heavy heart, remembering the betrayals that once tore us apart. But these moments were fleeting. I leaned on my son's strength and the community we'd built. Together, we celebrated small victories and supported one another through setbacks. Our resilience was our greatest weapon against the shadows of the past. One cold winter evening, a letter arrived from an old friend of my late husband. He wrote to express admiration for how we had handled the inheritance and rebuilt our lives. His words were a balm, reminding me that even in the darkest times, the love my husband and I shared had left an indelible mark. That legacy wasn't just about money, it was about the values and strength we passed on. My son surprised me by proposing a family reunion, something we hadn't done since before everything fell apart. It was risky, opening old wounds, but also a chance for healing on a broader scale. With cautious optimism, I agreed. Gathering relatives together was daunting, but I believed in the power of forgiveness and the possibility of mending broken ties. The reunion was bittersweet, filled with tears, laughter, and difficult conversations. Long-held resentments surfaced, but so did stories of love and shared memories. The first time in years, the family came together not for conflict, but for connection. I realized that healing was never about perfection, but about acceptance and the willingness to move forward despite imperfections. During the reunion, my son publicly acknowledged the mistakes he'd made and expressed his gratitude for the second chance he'd been given. The room was silent, then filled with tentative applause. That moment felt like a turning point, not just for us, but for the entire family. The cycle of betrayal and mistrust was breaking, replaced by a fragile but genuine hope. With the family healing, the foundation expanded its reach internationally. We partnered with organizations abroad, learning from diverse cultures and sharing our story globally. It was humbling to see how universal the struggles with trust, addiction, and family conflict truly were. Our personal pain had transformed into a global mission to help others reclaim their lives. Despite all the progress, I never forgot the man my husband was, the rock that held us together through everything. I kept his memory alive not only through the foundation, but in small, everyday rituals, lighting a candle on anniversaries, telling our son stories about his father's kindness and integrity. Those memories grounded me, reminding me why I fought so hard to protect what he had left behind. Looking back, I realized how much we'd all grown from a family shattered by betrayal and greed to one slowly rebuilding on the foundation of love and forgiveness. The $23 million inheritance was no longer a secret burden, but a symbol of resilience. Our journey wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that made every moment painful and joyful worth it. As the foundation entered its 10th year, I found myself reflecting on the incredible journey we had taken. The pain, the betrayal, the legal battles, it all seemed like a distant memory now. What remained was a legacy of hope, resilience, and healing. The $23 million inheritance, once a source of division, had become the seed from which new life and purpose had grown. I was proud of how far we'd come. My son and I had rebuilt not just our relationship, but our lives. The walls we'd built to protect ourselves had slowly crumbled, replaced by trust that was earned day by day. There were still hard conversations and occasional setbacks, but the difference was that we faced them together. The wounds of the past were real, but they no longer controlled our future. One quiet afternoon, as we sat in the garden my husband had once loved tending, my son surprised me with a small box. Inside was a key symbolic gesture representing a new chapter. "It's for the house," he said. "I want us to share it as a family, not as adversaries." Tears filled my eyes. After everything, this was the greatest gift I could have received, hope for true reconciliation. We opened the doors to our shared home, a place once shadowed by secrets and tension, now filled with laughter and light. Friends, family, and those touched by our foundation gathered there often, celebrating milestones and memories. The house, like us, had been through storms, but stood strong proof that healing was possible even after the darkest nights. With every success, I grew more certain that love, though fragile and complicated, was the most powerful force of all. Money could never replace it, but when handled with care, it could nurture it. Our story, marked by heartbreak and betrayal, had transformed into one of redemption and strength. I realized that the true inheritance was the bond we rebuilt and the lives we touched along the way. As I approached my later years, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had protected my husband's legacy and safeguarded my family from destruction. More importantly, I had watched my son rise from the ashes, becoming a man I was proud to call my own. Our past was not erased, but it had shaped us into who we were meant to be: stronger, wiser, and bound by love. In the end, the $23 million was more than money. It was a test of character, a measure of the strength of our hearts. We had survived greed, betrayal, and fear, emerging not just unbroken but united. I knew the future would hold its own challenges, but we had built a foundation firm enough to weather any storm. On the anniversary of my husband's passing, we held a ceremony at the foundation, honoring his memory and the journey that had followed. Friends, family, and supporters shared stories of hope and healing. As I looked around at the faces lit by candlelight, I felt overwhelming gratitude for the unexpected blessings born from hardship. I took a moment to speak, my voice steady but full of emotion. This journey has been difficult beyond words, but it taught me the true meaning of love, forgiveness, and strength. Our family is imperfect, but we are resilient, and that resilience is the greatest legacy of all. The room erupted in quiet applause, and I felt a profound sense of closure and hope. As the night ended and the candles flickered low, I looked to the stars, feeling my husband's presence near. Our story had come full circle, from heartbreak to healing, from secrets to truth. I was ready to face whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that love and forgiveness would always guide us home. This was our ending and our new beginning,